Something is changing in the world, and you can feel it. You feel it when you reach out to get cash, and the cashier looks at you like you're a stranger. You feel it when your bank account is flagged for a transaction you don't remember making. You feel it when a government official talks about digital identity with a calm, reassuring smile. This feeling is not paranoia. This feeling is discernment. The Bible described this moment with astonishing precision, 2,000 years before any algorithm existed. Revelation 13 wasn't pointing to some distant fantasy. It described a system, not just a mark on the skin, but a complete architecture of control. So efficient, so intrinsically linked to daily life that most people wouldn't even realize it when they entered it. I've spent years studying the intersection between geopolitics and biblical prophecy, not in a seminary, in the news, in political documents, and in the quiet decisions governments make when they think no one is watching. What I've discovered is this. The architecture of the beast's system isn't being built in secret. It's being built in plain sight, one digital transaction at a time, one surveillance camera at a time. The book of Revelation did not give us a metaphor. It gave us a model. In this video, we'll compare this plan to the world geopolitical map. 5 nations, 5 different methods, 1 destination. Let's begin. Before we talk about any specific country, we need to understand what the mark of the beast actually is. Because most people have a misconception about it. They imagine a soldier pointing a gun at someone's head, a single, dramatic, and unmistakable moment in which the world is forced to choose. But that's not how control systems have worked throughout history. Revelation 13:16-17 is one of the most accurate economic descriptions ever written in an ancient text. It says that no one could buy or sell unless they had the mark. Read this again carefully. Buy or sell. Do not worship. Do not swear allegiance. Do not kneel before a statue. Buy or sell. The system of the beast is not primarily a religious system. It is an economic system. Whoever controls the transaction controls life. And that is precisely what this system was designed for. History teaches us that no empire ever announced its chains. Rome didn't say to its provinces, "We are enslaving you." It gave them roads, aqueducts, grain, and games, the infrastructure of dependence before the yoke. Every system of total control in history has followed the same sequence. First, make people need you. Then, make them trust you. And finally, make refusal unthinkable. The beast system isn't inventing a new strategy. It's perfecting an old one. This time, the difference is that technology has compressed the timeline from decades to years. If you want to understand where the world is going, you don't need a conference on prophecies. You need a map of China. Not the China of tourist brochures and trade agreements. The China that spent 3 decades building, improving, and expanding the most sophisticated human control system ever conceived in the history of civilization. And what makes this alarming is that it's not hidden. It's documented, reported, photographed, publicly announced, and in many cases, celebrated by the government itself as a model that the rest of the world should consider. What China has built is not merely a reflection of the old bioengineering system. It is a functional prototype, operational, scalable, and already exported. The central element is the social credit system. It's not just a financial score. It's an AI-based behavioral assessment that monitors your purchases, online activity, travel patterns, and relationships. Associate with people with low scores, and your own score will drop. The system isn't just watching you. It's watching who you choose to associate with. A low score doesn't just affect your credit. Your children are barred from attending certain schools. You're prevented from buying airline tickets and traveling on high-speed trains. Your name and photo appear on public screens in shopping malls, displayed as someone to be avoided, someone the state considers untrustworthy. The system doesn't need to imprison you. It destroys your ability to participate in society until submission becomes the only open door. Now, open your Bible to Revelation 13:17. No one could buy or sell unless they had the mark.
The Apostle John, writing from his exile on the island of Patmos, described with disturbing accuracy what tens of millions of Chinese citizens have already been experiencing. This is no coincidence. It is the same mechanism, economic and social exclusion used as a tool for behavioral conformity, operating in the most populous nation on the planet. Not in prophecies. In practice. Today, in parallel, China has deployed the largest facial recognition network on the planet. More than 600 million cameras, approximately one for every 2.5 citizens, are connected to AI systems capable of identifying a face in less than 3 seconds, cross-referencing it with databases that link physical identity to financial profiles, health records, travel history, and government behavioral classifications. And then there's the digital yuan, programmable money. Money that can have an expiration date, that can be restricted to authorized merchants, authorized geographic zones, and authorized time periods. In certain pilot cities, citizens have already received currency that expires in a few days if not spent, a feature that simultaneously demonstrates that the state maintains permanent control over their financial lives. If your money can be switched off, your freedom is not freedom. It is a conditional permission, granted today, revocable tomorrow, that depends entirely on your continued cooperation with whoever controls the switch. China is not the exception. China is the model. The next country on our map is not an authoritarian regime. It is a constitutional democracy with a parliament, a free press, and a tradition of individual rights. And yet, in just 2 years, it demonstrated to the watching world that a free people, under sufficient pressure, can be persuaded to renounce freedoms that their grandparents considered non-negotiable. Australia entered the pandemic as one of the most admired democracies in the Western world. In 18 months, it built one of the most restrictive biosecurity infrastructures ever seen in any democratic country of the modern era. Cities were placed under lockdown for weeks, then for months. Residents were prohibited from traveling more than 5 kilometers from their homes. Curfews were imposed with fines and police presence. Drones were used for surveillance, in parks and beaches to identify people who had left home without a government-approved justification. And the overwhelming majority of the population complied, not because they were forced at gunpoint, but because the social pressure to comply had become virtually indistinguishable from moral obligation. This is the mechanism that the defense system needs to study more thoroughly, not the Chinese model of explicit state coercion. What Australia has demonstrated is something far more applicable. The ability to generate mass voluntary adherence through the manipulation of social consensus. When a government manages to make non-compliance seem not only illegal, but also selfish and dangerous, it no longer needs soldiers at checkpoints. It has millions of ordinary citizens carrying out the enforcement on its behalf. Your neighbor watches you leave your house and wonders whether to report you. Your coworker looks at you with visible discomfort because of a personal medical decision. Enforcement becomes social before it becomes legal. Vaccination passports determined access to restaurants, gyms, and shops. A clearly delineated two-class society. Those who complied with the rules circulated freely, those who did not were excluded from their basic functions. Emergency powers accumulated through a series of seemingly reasonable measures, each individually defensible, collectively representing a transformation of the relationship between citizen and state that would have been unthinkable 5 years earlier. The machinery was kept. Only the justification was withdrawn. And most Australians agreed. Many of them demanded even more. Australia is not a story about a bad government. It's a story about a prepared population. And a prepared population is exactly what the brutal system demands. The United States is a nation born of resistance. The men who signed the Declaration of Independence chose to risk everything, their fortunes, their families, their lives, rather than submit to concentrated power. The Second Amendment was not written by men who trusted governments. It was written by men who had just defeated one.
And yet, the nation constitutionally best prepared to resist the beast system is also, in many crucial respects, the nation culturally best prepared to accept it. Not by force, not through laws passed in secret, but rather by the market, by convenience, by technology, by the seamless integration of digital tools into all dimensions of daily life, in such a gradual and pleasant way that the loss of privacy seemed less like theft and more like a fair exchange. You provided us with your location data. We gave you step-by-step instructions. You provided us with your purchase history. We gave you personalized recommendations. You provided us with your face. We gave you the ability to unlock your phone without a password. Transaction by transaction, permission by permission, the United States has been trading its constitutional heritage for digital convenience, and doing so enthusiastically. Your smartphone knows where you sleep, where you work, where you practice your faith. Your bank knows all your financial decisions. Your health insurance knows your medications, your diagnoses, your sleep patterns. Your social networks know your fears, your desires, and the emotional states that are most likely to lead you to interact. Each of these systems, operating in isolation, is a product. Combined, interconnected, referenced to each other, analyzed by artificial intelligence, and made available to the appropriate institutional actors, they constitute a surveillance infrastructure that no authoritarian government in history could ever have dreamed of achieving by force. The United States did not build a surveillance state. It built a surveillance economy. And its citizens funded it voluntarily, signature by signature, none of which anyone actually read. A digital dollar is on its way. The arguments in its favor follow a familiar script: financial inclusion, efficiency, faster distribution of government benefits. What they invariably omit is the most important characteristic of any programmable currency issued by the government: that the issuing entity retains permanent and irrevocable authority over the conditions under which it can be spent. A digital dollar that can be completely disabled for any individual the issuing authority designates as non-compliant is no faster paper dollar. In a nation where cash has already been marginalized, where entire generations have never written a check, its introduction would not be seen as a revolution. It would be like an improvement. That's the velvet trap. It envelops you so gently that you mistake the pressure for comfort. In Russian political culture, there is a word, держава. There is no precise equivalent in English. It means something between great power, sovereign state, and sacred national destiny. This is how Russians speak of their country, not as a political entity, but as a civilization with a mission. This explains why the Russians have endured, throughout the centuries, levels of state authority that would have provoked revolutions almost anywhere else. In Russia, the state is not a servant of the people. The state is the embodiment of the national soul. And resisting the state is not merely a political act. It is, in the deepest psychological sense, an act of self-betrayal. The czars ruled by divine right. Their authority was theological before it was political. When the Bolsheviks dismantled this system in 1917, they did not dismantle the underlying psychology. They replaced the czar with the party and the church with ideology. The structure of absolute, unquestionable, and spiritually based authority remained perfectly intact. In Russia, the system for combating corruption will not arrive as technology, nor as public health, nor as an economic bailout. It will arrive as loyalty, as proof of belonging to the Russian national project, as a digital expression of its commitment to the nation, the sacred national destiny. Refuse, and you won't be considered inconvenient. You'll be considered a traitor. Russia already possesses the necessary infrastructure. The SORM surveillance system grants the FSB direct, warrantless access to all digital communications, every phone call, every email, every online search. Facial recognition networks cover the Moscow metro and public spaces. But the deeper dimension is spiritual. Patriarch Kirill of Moscow blessed military aggression as a sacred mission, providing the religious vocabulary that transforms political obedience into Christian duty.
The institutional church accepted the invitation to the table and blessed the chains it imposed on its own congregation. True believers in Russia, those who read the Bible more attentively than government press releases, have always known the difference. They knew it in the Gulag, where Baptist pastors memorized entire epistles so they could teach the word without paper. They knew it in the underground churches of the Soviet era. Those faithful are still there. In a country where brand loyalty is synonymous with loyalty, they will face the same question that has always defined the faithful remnant, not whether they believe in Jesus in their hearts, but whether they are willing to say so when the price has become all they possess. Of all the nations on this map, Sweden is the one you should be most concerned about. Not because it possesses the most powerful surveillance apparatus,
but because what Sweden represents is the version of the monstrous system that most people will find easiest to accept and hardest to identify for what it truly is. China rules with an iron fist, Russia with loyalty and fear, the United States with economic dependence, Australia with manufactured consensus. Sweden will rule through something much deeper, the feeling of belonging. The Scandinavian social contract is based on a cultural premise with profound prophetic implications, that the collective is always more important than the individual, that consensus is always preferable to dissent, and that anyone who persistently refuses to conform is not only exercising personal freedom, but committing an aggression against the community. There's even a term for it, the law of Janta. Don't think you're special. Don't think you know more than the rest of us. In a nation governed by this code, the system of repression does not need oversight mechanisms. Culture is the oversight mechanism. Since 2017, thousands of Swedish citizens have voluntarily implanted microchips in their hands. Without obligation, without government pressure. They chose freely, publicly, because, in the cultural ecosystem of progressive Scandinavia, being among the first to adopt body technologies is a sign of intelligence, modernity, and belonging to the visionary class. And the person who discreetly refuses is not met with anger, but rather with a mild, polite, and devastatingly effective social compassion. This is how subtle persecution manifests itself. It leaves no marks on the body, but on the soul. Thousands of small exclusions, none of them drastic enough to generate a protest, which together constitute a complete social quarantine for anyone who refuses to participate in the consensus. 5 nations, 5 systems, 1 destiny. This is no coincidence. It is coordination, not of a political alliance, but of a strategy conceived by a being whose patience does not run out with centuries, whose understanding of human psychology comes from observing all civilizations making the same mistakes, albeit with slight differences. The beast system doesn't create itself. Behind every control structure lies a will. And Revelation 13 describes a specific individual, a man whom the Bible calls the Antichrist. Consider something crucial about how Revelation describes the rise of the beast. It says that the whole world was amazed and followed the beast. They did not fear it, but were amazed. This is not the language of military conquest, but rather the language of fascination, of the irrational, almost religious devotion that a population places in a figure when its institutions fail, its economy collapses, and its sense of security shatters. In this vacuum of meaning, the human soul does not remain empty. It cannot remain empty. It yearns for something to rely on. And the Antichrist will arrive precisely when this search is most desperate. Revelation 13 also describes a second figure, the false prophet. 2 horns like a lamb, but he speaks like a dragon. He provides spiritual legitimacy to an agenda that is, in its essence, satanic. Observe the current world religious landscape, the growing ecumenical movement dissolving theological boundaries in the name of unity, religious leaders who demonstrate a constant willingness to subordinate doctrinal conviction to cultural approval. The infrastructure for the false prophet is being built with the same silent efficiency as the infrastructure for the digital dollar. But here's the truth that transforms this whole conversation, from fear to peace. The Antichrist is not the protagonist of this story. He is a permitted instrument in the unfolding of a plan conceived not by any government, any technology company, or any demonic intelligence, but by the God who sustains nations like a drop in an ocean, who declared the end from the beginning, for whom time itself is a creation. There is a valley in northern Israel called Megiddo. Armies have fought there since the earliest recorded instances of human warfare. And the Bible says that the final confrontation in human history will be fought there. Revelation 19 describes, heaven opened, a white horse, and the one who is called faithful and true, his eyes were like flames of fire. On his robe and on his thigh he had a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. The armies of the Antichrist divert their attack on Jerusalem to confront what descends from the open heavens.
And the weapon that destroys them is not a superior army, but rather the breath of his mouth. Every surveillance camera, every digital coin, every microchip under the skin, every institution that blessed the chains it imposed on its own congregation. It all ends there, in the dust of Megiddo, at the king's feet. The 5 nations we analyzed are not just a map of the world. They are a map of you. The same strategies that the beast system uses to control entire populations are the strategies the enemy has always used to control individual believers. He doesn't operate differently on a large scale. He simply operates on a different scale. China controls everything through words. The social credit system monitors what you say and uses it to determine your access. The enemy does the same internally. A tongue trained in bitterness loses its authority in prayer. Guard what comes out of your mouth. Australia was controlled through social pressure, by creating an environment where nonconformity was seen as morally wrong. A heart that fears cultural rejection more than it fears God has already been prepared for the submission that the brutal system will demand. America's vulnerability lay in the body, in the craving for comfort and security that prosperity produces and dependence demands. A body conditioned by years of convenience to instinctively seek the easiest option available will reach out for the target before the mind even has time to object. Russia was controlled by the mind, the most sophisticated attack of all. Not a mind that denies God, but a mind that redefines him, slowly, through 1,000 small reinterpretations, each individually defensible, each moving the boundary slightly further from Scripture and slightly closer to what prevailing authority demands. Sweden was controlled by the spirit, by the deep human need to belong, an offering of community that comes at the price of one's identity in Christ. Surveillance systems cannot monitor your prayers. Digital currency cannot tax your worship. Social credit systems cannot quantify your faith. And the veiled persecution of a culture that considers your convictions outdated cannot silence a mouth, protect a heart, discipline a body, or renew a mind fully surrendered to the living God. This is the inner map, and the believer who learns to read it will still be standing when everything that was built externally has turned to dust. I want to ask you a question, not a rhetorical one, not one that demands you stop. Are you ready? It's not about believing in the right things. It's not about saying the right prayer or walking to the right altar. Are you ready? Is your heart, at this very moment, genuinely and irreversibly turned toward Jesus Christ? The problem with comfort is that it's an extraordinarily effective anesthetic. It doesn't kill faith, but it lulls it to sleep. And a sleeping faith, seen from the outside, and often from the inside, appears almost identical to a living faith. You still go to church. You still know the hymns. You still feel something at Christmas and Easter. But something has settled down inside you. The urgency has dissipated. Prayer has become functional instead of relational. And in this tranquil and well-attended slumber, you have become the lukewarm church of Laodicea. The one Jesus said he would spit on. Readiness is not a destination. It is a direction. A daily decision, made in the ordinary hours of an ordinary life, in choices that no one else sees.
The person who will stand firm when the mark arrives at their door is not the one who has read the most books of prophecy. It is the person who has built, day after day, in the unheroic routine of private faithfulness, a relationship with Jesus Christ more real to them than anything the beast's system can offer or threaten. This relationship isn't built in the midst of a crisis. It's built before the crisis. It's being built right now, in the period between the warning and the test. The gospel is simple. God so loved the world that he sent his own Son to absorb all the consequences of everything we have done wrong. Every lie, every surrender to darkness, every choice made out of fear instead of faith, and to carry them to the cross and die under their weight, so that we wouldn't have to go through it. And then, to rise from that death as the permanent and undeniable proof that death is not the final word. This is the gospel. It demands nothing of you except the willingness to receive it. Romans 10:9 says, "If you declare with your mouth, Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved." That's the crucial point. It's not a feeling. It's not a specific quality of spiritual experience that you may or may not be able to produce. It's a declaration and a belief. Don't wait until tomorrow. Not after you've resolved the theological issues you've been carrying. And there is still time, perhaps a little, but still, gloriously, time, to be on the right side of history when the King arrives. If this video touched you, it's for a reason. Follow the channel, there's much more to come. Share it with 5 people who need to hear this, not because the algorithm rewards you, but because this might be the most important thing you do today. Leave a comment telling me what caught your attention, and suggest a topic for the next video, that question you have that no one dares to ask. I read them all.